Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here taking a look at the Sunday race of the day. It is the Grade 2 Rebel at Oaklawn Park. Of course, this card was moved from Saturday to Sunday, given some of the winter weather. They shifted their entire racing week back by 24 hours. With this being the race of the day, do note you can get free past performances for this race, Formulator, Classic, Timeform US, whatever you want to use to do your handicapping. Access that on DRF.com. And Mike, we've got a full field signed on for this race. 14 have been entered, and this is one of the more competitive Derby preps that we've seen so far on the trail.
Yeah, big field, as it should be, I guess, right, David? At this stage of the game, I don't know. I'm usually way further behind everybody else as far as Derby, looking at the Derby goes. But we're just waiting for horses to emerge in this division, aren't we, right now? And this feels like a pretty good spot for somebody to really step forward. This is a very interesting race.
It really is. And we talk about how a lot of these 3-year-olds haven't done a whole lot to cement their status as Kentucky Derby contenders yet. Actually, with this field having so much to prove, there are still 4 runners in this race that are on the current Derby watch that we're doing with Brad Free and myself. So we'll see if they can take that next step forward in this race. Sandman is your lukewarm 4-1 morning line favorite. Feels like he could go a little bit lower than that, but he does seem like the horse to beat in this race. To get a sense of where he might be placed in the early stages, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this Rebel. And Sandman's actually off the screen. He is a horse that likes to come from off the pace and was way back in his most recent start, which is probably influencing that pace projection a little bit. But Mike, there is plenty of speed in this race. Some horses stretching out from sprints, as well as a couple coming out of some route races that featured some pretty quick paces.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the actual order that the pace projector has these horses in early is how it's going to play out, but I did think this was going to be a fast pace. There are several candidates in here to come out of there running and try to be right up close.
The number 11 Speed King showed a lot of speed. He is aptly named when he led from gate to wire in the Southwest last time, though his trainer Ron Moquette did say last weekend that he was only 51% certain to run in this race. So we'll see if he ends up in the starting gate. If he does defect, that would significantly affect this pace scenario, and the Timeform US pace projector will update for scratches on Saturday morning. Let's go through this field, or I should say Sunday morning. Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1 Cole Battle, and we'll take a look at the replay of his most recent start when he won the Smarty Jones back in early January. And Mike, this horse has just done absolutely nothing wrong on the dirt. He is 4 for 4 on this surface. They tried turf a couple of times, didn't even run that badly on the grass, but getting back to dirt has really been the key for him. He can work out any kind of trip, and he still fires that strong kick through the stretch. This is a big step up in class for this horse, but he's been an overachiever so far.
Yeah, listen, he's got something to prove, to be sure. But he's, as you pointed out, he's good, man. He just shows up every single time. When they got him back to dirt at Delta, overcame a little bit of trouble in that race and won, closed into a fast pace when he won the Springboard Mile, did it totally differently in that replay we just watched, put him on the lead, and he just kept going into slower fractions. He's easy to root for. He's just not that fast at this point. We'll see if that breakthrough is coming.
The number 2 is Admiral Dennis, and I'm curious to get your take on this horse, Mike, because he's a rare runner for the Brad Cox barn that you might actually get a double-digit price on, just given how competitive this race came up. He was workmanlike when he broke his maiden back at Churchill, and then disappointed after that in the Gun Runner, but did stumble badly at the start of that race. His last race, he had to work for that victory. It was a slow pace. He was wide. I liked the runner up a little bit when he came back in the Risen Star last week. That horse didn't run a step. So I wonder about the quality of that race, but it is interesting that he's going to be a price for the Cox barn.
Yeah, I think he's pretty easy. He's a horse that you could go either way on pretty easily, I think, anyway. He's obviously one of the horses with an awful lot to prove in here. And I get it. He's been really short prices along the way, and he's only 2 for 4. I just feel like, David, if he's going to be a price in there, and obviously it's all contingent on that, if he's going to be a big price, I would try to stay positive on him, because I think I can make legit excuses, I think, for both of his losses. I actually felt like his debut was a really good performance without a great trip. And I like both of his wins. They're not great, but I think they're both pretty good. There's something there with this horse, and I don't mind Brad stepping him back up in class in here and just seeing what they have. If he's a price in this race, I think he's pretty interesting.
And what you think of a horse like Admiral Dennis is really going to depend on how you assess the quartet of horses that are coming out of the Southwest Stakes. And that group is led by the number 3 Sandman, who is up next. And let's begin the conversation with Sandman by showing the start of the Southwest. He is that gray horse that is hard to miss in the middle of the pack. That just got out of the gate really awkwardly. Not the only horse to have a bad break in the Southwest, but he hopped up, took a couple strides to regain his footing, and you could see what it did to him. He was way back heading into the clubhouse turn. But as we pick the race up in the stretch, he's going to make this big run down the center of the track to ultimately get up for second in this race behind Speed King. Mike, watching this replay and acknowledging the trouble that he had at the start, I still kind of felt like he was supposed to get there because he had all this momentum built up. The pace was fast, and he's kind of wandering and stalling at the end of this race. So I don't love to see that, but I do like the overall progression in this horse's career.
I'm going to agree with all that stuff, David. I mean, I do think I think he's a talented horse, and I do think he's the horse to beat. In here, as you mentioned when we moved on to Sandman, that how you feel about the Southwest will go a long way towards how you view this race. Personally, I don't like the Southwest as a race overall. I don't want any of those 3 horses that are coming back. I think 4 horses coming back in here. I don't really want any of them. I recognize that Sandman is probably the horse to beat in here. I just don't want to bet him at a short price.
The number 4 is Hypnus, who broke his maiden on debut last time at Fairgrounds. Was a surprise that day. Went off at 16-1 for Ken McPeak and ran a professional race for a horse making his first start. Raided along the inside, gradually worked his way into the clear at the top of the stretch, and he settled that race pretty quickly once he was asked to run by Brian Hernandez Jr. It's a big step up in class to try stakes company here, Mike, but I don't think we really know how good this horse could be.
Yeah, I'll agree. And he's definitely one of the horses where you want to wait and see what kind of price he is, I guess. I have nothing really to add to your take on his career debut. I just thought he was really professional, did everything right in there. He had a good pace in front of him, and he always was in the right spot there. He got clear in the stretch and he ran. I have no knocks on this horse. I'll just wait and see what kind of price he goes off at.
The number 5 is Madaket Road, and interesting that he's shipping into this race for trainer Bob Baffert, who does have some runners that have garnered a lot more hype so far on the Kentucky Derby Trail than Madaket Road has, but he's the one that is being elected to ship for this race. Mike, he started out in a couple of sprint races and I thought ran just fine to break his maiden. Last time they tried to stretch out around the 2 turns in the Lewis, where he was beaten by a couple of his more fancied stablemates. And I didn't see a big excuse in that performance. The pace obviously held together towards the front end, but I was looking to see a little bit more of a finish. And I'll just mention something that I noticed for trainer Bob Baffert when I was looking up some stats in DRF Formulator. Bob has great numbers at Oaklawn over the past 5 years. I believe he's 16 for 34 overall. But of those 16 winners, the biggest price winner among them was 2-1, and Madaket Road is no 2-1 shot in this race.
He's really not. You're right. Yeah, listen, Baffert usually ships here with intention, but your point's well taken there. He usually, the horses usually look a little bit better than this one, I guess. I'm kind of with you. I mean, I thought his first 2 starts were fine. I didn't like his Lewis enough to want to bet him back in here at some kind of underleg number.
The number 6 is Publisher, and I think he's a horse that is going to attract some attention coming out of the Southwest, even though he's a maiden on the way into this race. He did show that he was capable of running a 90-plus Beyer when he chased home American Promise 2 back in a maiden event where he was just second best to that foe, but they stepped him up in the Southwest last time, and I think we're going to show the replay again a little bit later in this preview, but he got some real trouble at the top of the stretch. He was trying to sneak through inside. Actually, it was American Promise that came over into his path, and he just lost all his momentum. I don't know if he was going to win that race, Mike. Maybe he would have been in the Superfecta if he hadn't had that trouble. And we'll see if this jockey upgrade to Flavien Prat gets a better trip for him. I think it's going to attract some more wagering support, though.
I thought so, too. And listen, I think you're probably right. Was he going to win the Southwest? I don't know that he was going to win. He was going to be a lot closer at the end of that race. In some ways, that's one of the reasons I really don't like the Southwest as a race overall. I understand. He ran a figure 2 starts back that will give him a real chance in here. And maybe that number, that 92 Beyer, will prove to be predictive going forward. I didn't think that he ran that well in that race. I didn't really see him do anything in there except chase a horse around the track and never really get that close to him. I don't know. I feel like this horse is probably going to take a little bit more money than he deserves to take in here. And I just don't want him if he's not going to be some kind of huge price.
Yeah, I agree with you. If he hadn't had that moment of trouble, he would have been saying he had a great trip in that race and finished third or fourth. The number 7 is Dreaminblue, who will be trying to stretch back out in distance to the two turns. He did try a two-turn mile once before at Oaklawn last December and didn't really finish off that race as the favorite, though he got a wide post position draw. He ran a fast number last time sprinting, Mike, but still the distance is an unknown factor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind them stretching him back out because as you've already noted there, the only time they went two turns, he had the far outside post, and they didn't really try to get aggressive with him. I think that his rider sort of knew he didn't want to get sort of hung too wide in there, so he just sort of took him back, and they didn't get aggressive. Maybe that'll change this time. I thought he looked good winning his most recent start, David, with a pretty fast figure. I also thought he ran well 2 starts back when he really made Innovator work for that sprint going short. So I think he's talented. I'm just not sure this is the right spot for him.
Up next is that horse that beat Dreaminblue in maiden company. It's the number 8 Innovator, and he has had some of the most chances of anybody in this race. He's making the 9th start of his career in this Rebel, and it did take him 7 attempts to break the maiden, doing so over Dreaminblue 2 back. And he focused on sprint races for all of those maiden tries, Mike, but they stretched him out in the Lecomte last time, and I thought this horse ran an underrated race because the pace was really fast and he just hung around until the very end. Watching that replay, you kind of can't believe that that's still him fighting it out all the way down to the wire. And he only loses that race by about 3/4 of a length. And while the Lecomte did not get a fast speed figure, I do think we have to look back at last week's Risen Star and maybe question whether the fast pace caused the number to be a little lower than it really deserved to be, because a few horses came out of the Lecomte to improve their numbers in that Risen Star, and Innovator was the one cutting out that ambitious pace. So maybe we're supposed to upgrade him a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. I wasn't sure really what to do with the fact that you're right. Some horses came out and ran a much faster race last weekend, but I'm not even sure what that figure means for that race. So I don't know, Dave. Listen, I'm with you. I thought he ran really, really well in the Lecomte the first time they finally stretched him out in distance, and it felt like he really liked it. Will he back it up in here? I guess that's the main question he has to answer. And I do think, and he did go a good clip in that Lecomte, but isn't this pace going to be even faster than that? How's he going to deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, if Speed King ends up running here, it's supposed to be a fast pace. If Speed King does come out, then it's going to help both Innovator as well as the next horse we're going to talk about, the number 9, Smoken Wicked, who is another horse that's trying to stretch out from sprint races. He's actually trying the 2 turns for the first time. His one prior mile attempt was around the 1 turn at Aqueduct, and that was not one of his better efforts, Mike. So I think there has to be some concern about how far this horse wants to go, but he is coming in with competitive speed figures against some overmatched competition at fairgrounds, but at least on the figs, he fits with this field.
Yeah, the distance was the main question for me. I'm not really convinced that he wants more distance. That being said, I also kind of feel like he could be one of the more, low key, more talented horses in this field. And I understand that they took a step back in class for him to get those 3 wins most recently. I just thought he looked really good winning all those races, David. And the big drawback for me, aside from the distance, is I personally feel like if he's going to win this race, it's going to be because Dallas Stewart tells Gaffalione to get aggressive and make the lead with this horse and see how far he can take them. I'm not sure that would really work out if this field stays intact, but that's what I would tell him to do. I really want to like this horse, and I want to use him somewhere. I would also require him to be a lot higher than that 8-1 morning line.
Another horse trying to make that jump out to the 2 turns for the first time is the number 10 Bullard, who was shipping in from Southern California for trainer Michael McCarthy. And this horse got some buzz early in his career for those first 2 visually impressive victories, coming from well off the pace to get the job done, going away each time, though he did get very fast paces to close into in both of those races. Didn't get the same pace set up last time in the San Vicente and was not able to deliver that kick. But you could also say that he was beaten by Barnes, who a lot of people consider to be one of the most talented 3-year-olds out in Southern California right now. I'm just not sure if I really trust this guy to get better with that at distance, Mike.
That's my concern too. I do think he's got a good amount of ability. I really did like his first 2 career starts. And I guess I could excuse the San Vicente last time because they really didn't go in front of him. Not that he ran right there. He's got a pretty big finish to him when things go his way. I wonder if he's just a closing sprinter, at least at this stage of the game.
The number 11 is Speed King, and he was the winner of the Southwest. Upset that race and paid $30 in doing so. He's been big prices in both of his career victories, actually. And Mike, he's run two turns twice now, and he has done it the hard way each time, going to the front end, setting honest to fast paces, and then battling back through the lane. We're picking up the replay of the Southwest once again here, and looks like he might get reeled in an upper stretch, but he kicks away from this field and just maintains those strides all the way through the wire. He's not stopping, and you can even watch this race on through the gallop out. They never get to him this day. So I don't want to take away the fact that this horse actually did a lot of work on the front end to win this race. You take a look at the Timeform US speed figure, which takes pace into account. His 118 just towers over this field. I think he's a legitimate contender based on that race. I just wonder how much pressure he's going to get up front this time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And listen, I'm not going to knock anything this horse has done on the racetrack so far. All three of his races are good. And you kind of got the feeling that he could deliver a performance like that Southwest last time when you go back and watch the Springboard Mile, because I know Coal Battle ran him down late in there, but this horse was dueling all the way around the track, and he was still trying to hang on at the end of that race. He's talented. Again, I don't love the Southwest as a race overall. I really don't know how to rate it. I do know that those horses are probably getting bet in here. And so I'm just going to try to avoid them and try to get somebody else home in this race.
The 12 Brereton's Baytown is cross-entered in the John Battaglia Memorial on Saturday at Turfway Park, and he looks like a gigantic price that's overmatched in both spots.
I didn't even really try to make a case for this horse, David. He looks overmatched.
Number 13, Tiztastic, completes that group that is exiting the Southwest. And Mike, I thought he got a strange trip that day because he actually broke way more sharply than most others in that field and was forward briefly heading into the clubhouse turn, kind of had to steady slightly when the winner crossed over on him. And then it just seemed like he gradually disengaged from the race. And Keith Asmussen tried to keep after him a little bit down the backstretch, but he was just losing position and losing position. Patch Adams tried to make that middle move around him on the far turn, and Tiztastic kind of took himself out of that spot, and he just wound up all the way at the back of the pack by the time they got to the top of the stretch. And yes, the race was falling apart a little bit at the end, but he was really running at the end and actually running with even better energy than Sandman through the final eighth of a mile. I think distance really works for this horse, and if the pace does heat up, I do believe he's going to be finishing at the end.
Yeah, I saw all the same things you did about his Southwest. Again, it's not a race that I love, but I did see that his trip seemed like it was far from ideal. And that, even with Sandman having like the obvious trouble, this horse, I feel like he was just never in a comfortable spot in there, and maybe he deserves a little extra credit. My main issue with him, David, is, first of all, he's only one on the grass. Not that he hasn't run well on dirt, but he's only one on the grass. And if I'm being honest, he's running some pretty good races. I don't really particularly like any of his dirt starts. He's run fine in them. I don't really particularly like any of them.
Rounding out this field is the number 14 Hot Gunner. He's another horse that is 50-1 on the morning line, and really tough to build a case for this one, Mike.
Yeah, he's another horse. He's a huge price on the line. He'll be a huge price on the tote board, and I didn't see any way to make him a serious contender in here.
Let's get to our picks for this grade 2 Rebel. And Mike, you're going to go for a bit of a price with the number 2 Admiral Dennis going out for the ever dangerous Brad Cox barn.
Yeah, again, if he's just a good price in here, and I think he should be, I just want to give him a chance to prove that he belongs in here. I do think there's something there with this horse, and I think he can get the right trip even if this pace is fast. So I'm going to take a little shot with him. The other horse that I wanted to get Smoken Wicked in there, the number 9. I don't know if he wants to go this far. I don't know what kind of trip he can pull. I just thought he was interested if he's a big price.
And I put the number 13 Tiztastic on top. I'm hoping that he's going to drift up a little bit from that 8-1 morning line. And I think that could happen just given how many horses have to get bet in this race. And I like the jockey upgrade that he's getting to Jose Ortiz. I do want to use a little bit of the number 8 Innovator if the number 11 Speed King comes out by some chance. He's a horse that I would want to upgrade. So 13, 3, 8, 11 for me, and 2, 3, 9, 1 for Mike in the Sunday race of the day. It is the grade 2 Rebel. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.